Thomas Nagel's The View from Nowhere, published in 1986, is one of the most influential philosophical works of the late 20th century. In this ambitious and complex book, Nagel attempts to reconcile two seemingly opposing perspectives: the subjective, personal viewpoint of individuals living in the world, and the objective, detached viewpoint that science and reason strive to achieve. The title itself, The View from Nowhere, encapsulates the paradox at the heart of the work: the idea that an objective view attempts to transcend any particular perspective, thus coming from nowhere in particular, yet all such views must ultimately be rooted in a somewhere, namely the personal consciousness of a subject. 1. The central problem: subjectivity versus objectivity. Nagel begins by outlining a fundamental tension in human thought. On the one hand, we are subjective beings with a first-person point of view. We feel emotions, have beliefs, and experience the world from a personal standpoint. On the other hand, we also have the capacity for objectivity, the ability to step outside our personal views and try to understand the world from a detached, impersonal perspective. This capacity is evident in science, mathematics, and moral reasoning, where we seek to arrive at truths that are independent of who we are. Nagel's central thesis is that philosophy must grapple with the conflict between these two standpoints. According to him, both perspectives are legitimate and necessary, but they pull us in different directions. The subjective viewpoint is inescapable. We cannot completely abandon our personal perspective, yet our striving for objectivity drives us to build systems of thought that pretend to be detached from any particular vantage point. 2. The method of expansion. A key conceptual tool in The View from Nowhere is what Nagel calls the method of expansion. This is the process of trying to move from a limited subjective perspective to a broader, more inclusive one. It's a way of climbing the ladder of objectivity. For instance, a person might begin by recognizing that others have minds like their own, moving from solipsism to intersubjectivity, and then further recognize that moral truths must apply equally to all, leading to universalist ethics. Each step involves abstracting from one's personal situation and adopting a more impartial viewpoint. However, Nagel warns that complete objectivity is ultimately impossible. No matter how far we expand our perspective, there is always a residual subjectivity that cannot be eliminated. We remain embodied beings with particular psychological makeups, histories, and perspectives. Number 3. The self and the mind-body problem. Nagel devotes substantial attention to the mind-body problem, the question of how mental states such as thoughts, emotions, and sensations can arise from physical processes in the brain. This problem, he argues, is emblematic of the conflict between subjective and objective perspectives. From the inside, our mental life is immediate, rich, and vivid. From the outside, the view from nowhere, the brain is just a mass of neurons firing in response to stimuli. Nagel critiques reductionist theories that try to explain consciousness solely in terms of physical processes. He famously argues in earlier work, e.g., What Is It Like to Be a Bat, 1974, that consciousness has a subjective character that resists objective description. In The View from Nowhere, he extends this argument by insisting that any complete account of reality must include both subjective and objective aspects. Consciousness, he suggests, may require a radical rethinking of our scientific worldview. 4. Ethics and the moral point of view. In the realm of ethics, Nagel explores how we construct moral systems that aim to be objective and impartial, while also acknowledging that individuals have personal motives and desires. He is particularly interested in the moral point of view, the idea that morality requires us to step outside our personal preferences and consider the interests of others equally. Nagel distinguishes between two types of reasons: agent-relative and agent-neutral. Agent-relative reasons are tied to a person's particular commitments, e.g., I should help my friend because he is my friend, whereas agent-neutral reasons are independent of such commitments, e.g., suffering is bad, whoever experiences it. A robust moral theory, Nagel suggests, must find a way to balance these competing types of reasons. For Nagel, morality exemplifies the broader tension between subjectivity and objectivity. We feel personal loyalties and particular motivations, but we also recognize impersonal moral obligations. Resolving this tension is one of the central challenges of ethical philosophy. 5. Political theory and justice. Nagel also applies his framework to political philosophy. He critiques both utilitarian and libertarian theories for failing to adequately integrate the subjective and objective standpoints. Utilitarianism, with its impersonal calculation of the greatest good, risks ignoring the individuality of persons. Libertarianism, on the other hand, can become too focused on subjective entitlements and ignore broader concerns of fairness and justice. Nagel is particularly drawn to a kind of egalitarian liberalism, which seeks to harmonize personal rights with objective principles of fairness. He argues that a just society must take into account both the particular circumstances of individuals and the need for impartial institutions. Political legitimacy, in this view, requires a synthesis of personal and impersonal considerations, a fusion of the view from somewhere with the view from nowhere. Paragraph 6. Death and the limits of objectivity. One of the most profound sections of the book deals with death. Nagel addresses the anxiety and puzzlement we feel when contemplating our own mortality. He points out that death is particularly troubling because it forces us to confront the ultimate limits of our perspective. From a purely objective standpoint, death is just the cessation of biological processes. But from a subjective point of view, death represents the annihilation of the self, the loss of all that is meaningful. Nagel does not offer easy consolation, but instead argues that grappling with death reveals something deep about the human condition. Our ability to see ourselves from the outside as temporary, finite beings stands in tension with our inward experience of life's significance. The existential weight of death is a result of this unresolved duality. The role of philosophy. Nagel sees philosophy as a discipline uniquely suited to navigating the tension between subjectivity and objectivity. Whereas science tends to privilege the impersonal and literature often valorizes the personal, philosophy tries to understand both and bring them into relation. Philosophy helps us recognize that neither standpoint is complete on its own. He writes that the human condition is marked by a desire to transcend our limitations while being unable to escape them. We are creatures who seek objectivity but are confined to subjectivity. This paradox is not merely theoretical, it is at the heart of what it means to be a reflective human being. 8. Criticisms and legacy. The View from Nowhere has received both admiration and critique. Some have praised its clarity and ambition, while others have found it too abstract or overly skeptical. Philosophers such as Bernard Williams and Derek Parfit have engaged with Nagel's ideas, offering alternative formulations of subjectivity, ethics, and personal identity. Despite differences, most agree that Nagel's book makes a powerful case for the necessity of holding both subjective and objective viewpoints in tension. In an era increasingly dominated by scientific objectivism or personal relativism, Nagel offers a nuanced middle path. Conclusion. Thomas Nagel's The View from Nowhere is a profound and challenging meditation on the nature of human thought, ethics, consciousness, and mortality. It explores the conflict between the personal and the impersonal, between the embedded self and the detached thinker. Rather than resolving the tension, Nagel shows that it is constitutive of human rationality and identity. To live philosophically, for Nagel, is to dwell in that tension with honesty, clarity, and humility.